there, it's Gabriele Nicolay from Speech Kids and Raising Orchid Kids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their little kids. And today we are talking about gender in preschool with Ro Adler. Ro, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Tell the good people a little bit about yourself.
Great. My name is Ro. I am an educator and an artist. I live in Philadelphia. I've been working with kids in lots of different capacities for the last 10 or 12 years. Most recently, I was the associate director of a community art school in Philadelphia, running all of our children and youth programming. And I am trans. I identify as non-binary. I use they, them pronouns, and have been out as trans for the last about 4 years. And I am also queer, and I came out as queer 10 years ago. Yeah, I love kids. I love working with little ones, learning from them and playing, and I'm super excited to get into just what I think is a really super meaningful and interesting topic with you today. And also, Gabriele and I have known each other for my whole life. We're very close family friends, and one of my earliest childcare gigs was watching Gabriele's kids. So
yeah, that's true. Actually, you were present minutes after one of them was born.
Yes.
And I was present minutes after you were born.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I'm really glad. Thank you for, number one, introducing our relationship so lovingly, but also for bringing up your personal experience, because it's certainly germane to the topic at hand. And I've forgotten to ask you whether we were going to talk about that too. So, so thank you. So you're coming at this topic of gender in preschool and how this shows up from a very personal perspective, but also from a professional perspective. You've done a fair amount of reading, a fair amount of coaching on this, sort of learning. And so here's the big question. How does gender even show up in preschool? What does that even mean to talk about gender in preschool? Aren't people just boys and girls anyway? What the hell?
Great questions. Well, so I worked as a preschool teacher for a few years, and that was kind of my most concentrated time to get to study when this happens and what it looks like, because we were a mixed age preschool, ages 2 to 5. Had some groups 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds together, and another group 4 and 5-year-olds. So you could sort of see, and knowing the same kids over the course of the many years that I was there, you get to kind of see trends in what kids are talking about, and when they're noticing, when they're asking questions, what they're noticing and asking questions. And Gabriele, would love to hear kind of your backup or affirmation, or if you've had different experiences around any of this.
Yeah.
But in my understanding, kids are noticing, kids are observant, and kids are sponges, and they're always noticing everything around them, including messages that they're receiving about gender. What's a boy, what's a girl, what's a man, what's a woman. But they don't really care until around 3 or 4, when they start noticing and naming anatomical differences, maybe differences in clothing, might start requesting specific clothes, might start asking questions about what they're seeing, might show preferences for a certain kind of play, like, for example, might gravitate towards the skirts in the dress-up bin or towards the construction hat, to give 2 very gendered examples. But up until that point, I think it seems like it's much more under the surface.
Yeah, well, and that tracks, absolutely, because that tracks with what we know about development, which is around 3.5, 4, kids are sorting, and they are absolutely labeling the differences that they have perceived And now they are processing those differences and they want to know what it means. And so in the same way that kids are processing race, right? Meaning there are different skin colors. And to be very clear, noticing skin color is not the same thing as being racist, being bigoted, being biased. That comes maybe not much later, but it comes after, right? After we notice. First comes the noticing, then comes the ascribing of meaning. And so in the same way for gender, right, they're getting these sort of implicit messages. And then now when we reach a certain point cognitively, we're able to start asking explicit questions and sort of gleaning meaning. And some of it is like, well, where am I? Right? So I have brown hair and green eyes, and you have brown hair and green eyes. We must go together because we're the same. And so preschool is a fascinating time to not mess with, that's the wrong word, but I do think of it as messing with this construct because brains are pattern making machines. So we see similarity and like gravitate towards like, and that's just automatic, but we have an opportunity, and you have done a lot of this, to hone that, to shape it. So tell me, like, I don't know if you can give me like an example of how that played out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I would do at the beginning of the school year was I would write an email to parents introducing myself and saying, I am non-binary, I use they, them pronouns. Here are some ways, here's two things that you can say to your kids around gender when they ask about it. One is that we don't know if someone feels like a girl, a boy, or something else, based on what they look like. You have to ask. And two, yes, just offering this framework. There's girls, there's boys, and there's people who don't feel like girls or boys. Even that very basic introduction of a third category, I think, is a lot to chew on for a lot of families, and is an appropriate amount of information to share with a kid who's sorting, because then they can add a third category.
That is fascinating. And I'm so glad that you brought this up, because the amount of information matters. Because kids are asking questions doesn't mean they're ready for Stonewall and Pulse and whatever else is coming right up in our heads in terms of what it means that whatever gender means to us, right? And the ways in which those are shifting. I have this story, and I forgive me if I've told you, and forgive the audience will forgive me if I've told them, but my son's godmother is Black. She's African-American. She has dark skin. And he was sitting next to her about age 3 or 4, watching television. She was babysitting one night, and he says, "God, your skin is Black." And she goes, "Where?" Martin Luther King, civil rights, slavery, like all the things, right? And to her immense credit, she said, yes, it is. And that was the end of the conversation. So your point about like just enough information to encompass what is being noticed, that's all they need at this age. And if they ask the next question, then you answer the next question, but you answer it at face value, right? So then the specific question about my teacher, well, how come they don't feel like a girl or a boy? They just don't. I don't know. You could ask them. I have to confess, Ro, as I was just saying this, I just want to point this out. I want to name it for the people who are watching too. What I was going to say before I said you can ask them was you can ask her. It is a monitoring exercise that is becoming easier, but is not automatic for me at all. And I part of me wants absolution for that from you. Part of me wants it to like be okay. What is your view about mistakes and questions?
They happen all the time. I think, you've known me my whole life. And so I do give extra grace for having to make a change in how you view someone. Um, and I think, most, I don't want to speak for all trans people, all non-binary, gender non-conforming people. But what I will say is that in my experience, I and most of my friends, if there's a difference between doing it intentionally and doing it unintentionally.
Yeah.
Obviously, intention really matters. When you make a mistake about someone's pronouns, correct yourself and move on. All we want is for people to practice and to try and get it right.
Good advice. It will be, you will notice, way easier. And actually tell us about when you introduced yourself and your pronouns. How did that go over at school? I can ask you about the parent response later, but like, was it hard for those kids?
Right. Well, pronouns is an interesting one because
preschoolers are horrible at pronouns of any kind.
across the board. It's just completely arbitrary.
Okay, wait, total tangent, speech and language tangent, though it may be. I, as a speech and language pathologist, have been in the business of teaching pronouns to kids and of showing them, we talked about this offline, showing them hyper-gendered examples of girls and boys in an attempt to make this he-she difference. And I always felt really horrible about it because what you said, which you can't tell how someone feels on the inside based on what they look like on the outside. And so it was this whole thing for me. Anyway, and I'm sure for many speech language pathologists who are like, why is this such a big deal? Why do we need to use this? Ask the person, use theirs. Anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I think it actually ties into sort of the adult level conversation, which is like that you just brought up, which is like, how does it feel to be misgendered or mispronounced? And, what's your approach towards that? It's all about exposure and practice. So even as an adult, the more trans and non-binary people that the more people who are using pronouns that aren't the first thing that come to the tip of your tongue, the easier it gets. And it's the same with kids. The more that you practice and the more that they hear the variety of language that can be used to describe people or to refer to people, the easier it is it just feels normal. And it feels easier to understand. And I think it reflects inward, where once a child gets to the point where they're connecting pronouns and gender and how do I feel and how does so-and-so feel, having kind of a frame, having something to map this onto that is beyond he or she, or where people can feel like he one day and then feel like she another day, or people can change from one to another over a longer period of time. Like this kind of fluidity and the existence of more categories makes it easier for a child and a person to map themselves onto what they truly feel about themselves.
I hear you so loud on that from the child perspective. And as a parent, I don't want my child to be fluid. I want to know if they're a boy and a girl or a girl. Sketch this out for us, particularly in preschool. Let's keep it to preschool. But there are plenty of boys who would like to, number one, play up the stereotype, the new stereotype. I don't know what it is, right? The boy who wants to play in the dress up area. Girls somehow are allowed to delve into the boy realm. If you have a rough and tumble girl, it's not quite as threatening to the patriarchy as a boy who wants to wear a dress. That is ugh, and we're all tearing our hair out. But so let's talk about those guys, those little ones. those children. So how does this play out? Because you mentioned fluidity, you mentioned sort of gravitating toward play areas. So draw us a picture.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me not to go kind of cerebral with that one, because I think the fact that it's harder for adults to imagine boys playing with stereotypically feminine things, that is homophobia right there. That is a fear that your son will turn out to be gay.
Yes. Okay.
Or, and I think
hang on, let's label that. Let's keep it there though.
Yeah.
It's homophobic. So just understand, and not because we want to shame anybody who's watching this. This is a hard conversation to have. Everybody's got to be on their P's and Q's. And we need to understand that we have these biases running in background.
Right. So what, for me, this, it's also transphobic. So just wanting to put those together.
Yeah.
But for what this speaks to is that we allow boys less of a range of expression. Masculinity has more narrow categories than femininity does. And we can get into kind of how we see this, but I think that would be the main example, would be it raises more flags to have a girly boy than to have a boyish girl, right? People feel more worried about that. What I would say to a parent who doesn't want their child to be fluid and wants their child to be just one or the other is, your child likely does have a much more fluid idea of gender than you do, because they're new.
They're new here.
They're new here, and they're taking in a lot of information, some of which might be contradictory, which might be confusing. They're trying to make sense of it, but that's a gift. Your child has fresh eyes and is experiencing the world with just this curiosity and this openness that is really precious, and should be protected, I think. And I think that, as an artist, I really feel strongly about protecting children's creativity, because, when a child gets to a certain age, I would say like 6 or 7 is when kids start saying, I'm not good at art, or I'm an artist. And of course, all children are brilliant artists, and we don't want anyone kind of shutting themselves off that way.
You have something behind you that
I do. Yes, I have a painting of Rapunzel that a 4-year-old friend made for me many years ago that I adore. But so I bring in the art, the artist analogy, just to share that this fluidity, this curiosity, this exploration, this openness is a gift, and is something that if you as a parent can be curious with your child, be non-judgmental, withhold your adult biases, just pause and really listen, to tune into what your child is curious about and is exploring. That's the way that your kid is gonna feel most loved and accepted, is gonna have the most fun, is not gonna feel like there are limits to their, expression, their play, what they can play with, who they can play with. And also, I think it's really meaningful for parents too, to like experience that yet again through your child's eyes, because when else, are you going to get to open up to that level? If not alongside a child. I'm
like, yes, please. I want to do my flopping thing. Cause just there's so much of what you said that I want to go back and like just digest, because I think you're right. It's what struck me in what you were saying was, we can do all of that mental exercise as regards creativity, interests in subjects, interest in different people. And somehow when we get to gender, we are like, nope, there's no curiosity about gender. Nope, doesn't exist.
It's fear only.
Only fear. And it's so interesting if you think of it that way, which I never have until right now, by the way. I mean, I have thought about this topic a lot, but why? Why is that? And I think actually I'm going to answer my own question, because I think part of it was, well, for some of us, we didn't know we could. We didn't know we should, except when you're confronted with someone who does and who is, and then you're like, oh, hang on, I got to check. I have to question something here. And that's uncomfortable for people, to have assumptions questioned. Somehow, again, we're willing to do it about art. I'm not a good artist. You know, certainly there are plenty of parents who are like, we're not artists in this family. Okay, that's kind of what it is. But then there are many people who are like, I'm not an artist, but my child might be. In the same way.
Or who might respond to a child saying, I'm not an artist, or I'm not good at drawing, who might respond just let's try another tool, or I love this painting that you made and you were so excited about this one and you chose to use such a beautiful blue color in this painting. You know, like we have approaches to that kind of internal shutdown. I will add, I think race and gender work very differently. And racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia work very differently. But I do think this is another category where I see the conversation moving really quickly away from curiosity and noticing and into fear. And I think it's a fear of doing something wrong as a parent, or a fear of harming your child as a parent, or a fear of your child being harmed. I think it's, yeah, I recognize that there's a lot of fear in both of these categories.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think so two things to add kind of to this mix. One is, I felt like my mere presence as a trusted adult who is non-binary, we didn't talk about gender that much, you know, like it wasn't every day that a kid would come up to me and say, are you a boy or a girl? And I would say, I don't feel like a boy or a girl. It wasn't a huge part of the explicit conversation and the explicit relationships that I had with children and with their families. But I know that my existence and my presence as like a caring, loving adult teacher who was a central part of their lives, I knew that in and of itself helps kind of make more things possible for the kids and for the families.
It normalizes it because it's just like that's just who's there when you go to school.
Yeah, that's teacher row.
It's not a thing, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I think kind of as adults we get caught up in is our own biases, our own experiences, our own fears around gender, around race, around whatever kind of big, complicated global issue. And this is sort of, I think, what your example about your son's godparent, just instead of going into like the civil rights movement and trauma and like all the places where her adult brain was going, she sat with the child and said, yes, met the child where the child was at and said, yes, my skin is Black. And I think that is such a useful, that was something that came up. It's something that comes up a lot when you're an adult working with young children. You see a child may say something that is offensive, or a child may say something that indicates that they really don't understand something. And rather than there can be this rush of like, well, I have to intervene right now, and I have to correct right now, and I have to make sure that they're on the right track, and I have to prevent, I have to nip this in the bud. And what that can lead to is just very complicated conversations that are not developmentally appropriate, that are hard for everyone, and where like
the only thing they're getting is your fear energetically, where they have stopped listening to the words that you're saying, try as you might to make them very cogent and intelligent, and they're only responding to your anxiety. Completely.
So an example around gender that might come up is, let's say you have a child who is a boy who wants to wear a dress to school. You don't need to take that as a moment to say, well, do you feel like a girl? Do you want me to say she, her pronouns for you? Like, do you want to change your name? It can be, okay, what dress do you want to wear? What do you like about wearing a dress? Just start exactly where the child is at, and see what they're thinking about. Get curious with them. And just kind of place a hold on all of your adult, whatever, confusion, fear, insecurity, worry.
It's such a good example to just, okay, which one do you want to wear? And what do you like about this? Because it might be, my best friend was wearing one yesterday, and she's a girl, and I want to feel close to her. And then they get to school and they're like, I hate this. Like, put me back.
It might be, I like wearing this. I like the way a skirt feels. Yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah. And if I think this is just like, we share this as an approach with early childhood, and with all kids, but just meet them where they're at. They may not be, they may not be questioning their gender. They may not even really be thinking about gender when they want to wear a skirt.
Well, and this brings up like a whole other thing that you and I have talked about previously, which is, why are we even gendering children who are prepubescent, who are not why are we even doing that? Why can't they just be kids? I told you this story. I'm going to tell everybody this story. I went to a very well-regarded school here in Washington, D.C., preschool, and there was a birthday party, and the parent had brought crowns, pink crowns for the girls, and I don't know, magic wands or something. It was blue for the boys. First of all, that is such a load of horse shit, since pink used to be a male color, and now it's a female color. Okay, fine. And a boy at the table went to grab a crown. And the teacher, this was where I was like, what is going on here? The teacher said, that's for girls. Can you talk a little bit about why that's horrible?
It's enforcing it's sending this message to kids. Someone else decides what you wear. Someone else decides how you're seen. And there are only two categories, and you can only pick one. And you can't pick, actually. We've picked for you. I mean, what would you add to it?
I love what you said, because there's not a parent alive who wants that for their adult child. We all profess, and you're not a parent, but I am a parent. I was going to say yet. I don't know if you're planning. That's irrelevant. All parents are walking around wanting their future adult children to be what? Resilient, empathetic, self-sufficient, and to be able to advocate for themselves. And what you just described is the antithesis of growing a child who will become all of the things that I just said. And I actually I could cry right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just that moment, right? It's a collection of those moments.
It's a steady stream throughout a human life. I mean, there's not a person under the sun who hasn't received messaging about who they should be based on
Somebody else's idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I think, hopefully at some point in the future, there won't be a need for interventions into this stream, because trans people being trans will be normalized, people being non-binary will be normalized, will be visible. But right now it's very, it takes work as a parent to disrupt this steady stream of socialization, and to, in this particular area of gender, offer your child more options. And it's not, well, yeah, I'll stop there.
What are the numbers on this? Do you know any, do you have statistics or any numbers? And it's okay if you don't. My guess is, and this is what I was going to say, but I wanted to check it with you first. My guess is the thing about it is, and I think this is true in education, and I deal a lot with kids who are in special education, right? There's a small subset of the population for whom this applies. It's not most people. And so most people, for better or for worse, are kind of okay. They can work within the category that they find themselves prescribed. But then there are people who can't and won't, and are doing everything that they can to sort of get out of a category, a container that feels restrictive. And I think that's where we have to use a little bit of what we purport to want to teach our children about kindness and empathy, for people whose experience doesn't match our own, and yet who nonetheless are deserving of a life that befits them. So anyway, that's kind of, I just jumped all the way ahead.
Yeah, right. Well, a little bit of a vocabulary, in case it's helpful. So a person who identifies with the sex that they were assigned at birth is what we refer to as cisgender. Cis meaning, I think it means same.
Same, right?
Yeah.
CIS, yeah.
CIS gender. So, Gabriele, are you cisgender?
I am a cisgender woman. I am a straight cisgender woman.
Are you straight?
I am straight.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
Straight cisgender woman. And I'm a queer transgender person.
I love it. Okay, so cis, trans. Trans refers to?
Trans is a complicated one because people might define it differently. But I would say trans is anyone who doesn't identify with the sex that they were assigned at birth.
Okay.
So, and then a third category would be non-binary. And I love this word because I identify as non-binary. I don't feel like a girl or a boy. This is a binary, girl and boy. And I am not part of that binary.
I like that one the best, actually, because it's the reason I like it is because it, for me, is very, it allows for a continuum, a spectrum of gender, in the same way that we can talk about a spectrum of neurodiversity. We talk about an autism spectrum. Like I just find the idea of all different spectra. Really interesting and probably the most accurate way we have of describing sort of experiences that vary so wildly, but that are nonetheless all human.
Mm-hmm. And I like it too because it feels pretty simple. And, bring it back to early childhood feels like it's not a mouthful. You say, I don't feel like a boy or a girl. I feel like something else, someone else. Mm-hmm.
So takeaways, add a third category, answer the question that's asked, wait for the next one if it ever comes, which it probably won't at that point.
And be curious with your kid.
Curious. Extend
Hold,
curiosity to gender as well.
Yes. Extend curiosity and keep your adult
shit
business in check.
Take a deep breath first.
Mm-hmm.
Ro, we're going to do this again sometime because there's so much to unpack. And I appreciate your presence in my life and your expertise on this subject matter in particular. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful talking with you.